Our first supplier today here is Martijn de Boer, founder of ID verification solutions provider CDDN. Before we let him explain the how and why of the ID verification in the regulated Dutch market, I would like to ask all our viewers, you at home, participants in the webinar, to participate in a brief audience poll. In order to do so, please scan the QR code on your screen or visit slido.com and enter the event code GIH. Next, select the poll tab on the top of the screen in order to submit your response. Our first poll question here is: which percentage of potential customers that start the registration process with an operator fail to complete it? There are several options provided. Please let us know what you think. This gives an interesting backdrop of the questions we're going to ask Martijn here. Give it a few more seconds. Again, please, I ask you to look at the Slido app by pointing your camera at the QR code, or go to slido.com and use the event code GIH. Like that, you can participate in the polls as well as the Q&A for the speakers who are at home. Great. I think that gave an interesting backdrop to the first questions to Martijn here. You see what the audience thinks. What do you think is the right answer, Martijn?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Willem, and good afternoon all. We indeed conducted a small survey with some of the casino guests, and there was quite some interesting outcomes. Two of the main reasons that people fail to finish the onboarding flow or have this drop-off is the fact that so many steps need to be undertaken. Sometimes it's confusing because all operators use different flows for onboarding. And one of the things that came out is the confusing elements and the steps that need to be taken. Furthermore, there's also the need to ask for BSN, and that's quite unique in the Dutch market, because outside of the government and non-governmental or semi-governmental organizations, the gaming industry is the only branch that needs to verify with the BSN in order to get registered with Crux. That's also seen as a high risk to customers, because they say, okay, I only communicate with my social security number with the government, and why do I need to share my BSN in order to get checked with, in this case, Crux, of course. So there's a lot of hesitation, and of course the many different steps that need to be undertaken.
Great, Martijn. Moving to the second question: how, based on what you just told us, how can the registration process be streamlined to lower the drop-off rate?
Well, we have been following this file for many years, as you know, and we figured out we are kind of reinvented the onboarding flow, so to speak. So we looked at existing solutions that are out there: ID document scanning, IDIN, IBAN name check, and such. And we figured out that there are means of, creating shortcuts for the player. And the main thing is that you need to register the player's credentials and personal information as soon and fast as you can. So in our case, over 20 casino operators chose our Verify Me onboarding flow. And say 98% of the cases we are successful. Within 3 minutes, we have people onboarded. And that has mainly to do with the fact that we automate certain steps. So in our case, a user only needs to perform 2 steps in order to get verified. So 2 manual handlings in order to get verified. And the second is that we allow the user to make changes during the registration process. So if he's done an ID document scan, we allow the user to make minor changes to his name or social security number or place of birth, in order to not have to do the scan again for that ID document. And we have several, small, smart solutions for that. And that saves money in the process and speeds up the process.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Martijn. Before we wrap this up, we have time for one audience question. And we have some questions coming into Slido again. If you would like to ask a question to one of the speakers, please use the Slido app to the Q&A part, the Q&A tab on top of the screen, to answer your question. And we have a question here. There's one question for you today here, Martijn. Do you supply KYC tools or solutions that can support our responsible gaming policy? Responsible gaming policy, Martijn.
Yes, we certainly do. And we further improve the responsible gaming policy by adding certain data elements during registration, but also with the aftercare monitoring or continuous monitoring after the registration of information. So we supply several solutions like insolvency check, people that have been placed under guardianship, people that have moved to a different address, people that have deceased. And of course, PEP and sanction list checking, that's a mandatory thing for the RGA. And we also supply that. So in our case, we take care of the data in order to fuel your responsible gaming policy. And furthermore, we provide and enrich socio-demographic features. Things like income, things like property value, is the property rented or owned? What's the family composition? When was the last date that the property was sold? So all these elements are being added to the questionnaire that the player needs to fill in once he wants to enter the casino. For example, what kind of amount and when and how long, etc., etc. And combined with these data elements we provide, they are able to boost their responsible gaming policy. And we are doing that for over 20 casino operators.
Very interesting. And thank you, Martijn, for answering this question. If you'd like to know more about CDDN's products and services, you can see on the screen Martijn's contact. And as mentioned before, this webinar is recorded. We'll share a link to the recording in the next newsletter, so you can have a look at this information also at a later stage.